João was a man of few words, not because he had nothing to say, but because speaking was never easy for him. Since he was young, stuttering had followed him like an unwanted shadow, turning simple words into difficult obstacles to overcome. However, this difficulty never diminished his desire to live fully and to work with dedication and honesty. In the office where João worked as a security guard, he was known for his punctuality and commitment. Always in an impeccable uniform, he carried out his tasks with admirable seriousness. Despite his shyness, colleagues could see the glimmer of kindness in his eyes and his readiness to help when needed. He was a man of average height, with dark hair and brown eyes that conveyed a quiet determination. His movements were precise and assured, an essential quality for someone in his profession. But there was something about João that few noticed at first glance. A deep inner strength, a resilience that allowed him to face each day with courage, even when words betrayed him. João lived in a modest but welcoming house, which he shared with his wife Maria and their 2 children, Pedro and Ana. Maria was his rock, always ready to listen and offer support, while Pedro and Ana were the light of his eyes, filling his life with laughter and joy. He found in his family the motivation to keep going, even when the world seemed to challenge his abilities. At the office, João maintained a professional demeanor, even when his words came out in stumbles. He knew that stuttering was just a part of who he was, not what defined him entirely. João stood out for his integrity and his willingness to give his best, qualities that earned him the silent respect of many, even if not expressed in words. João knew that each day at the office was a new opportunity to prove himself, and despite the challenges, he was determined to show that behind every hesitation, there was a strong and capable man. His tireless spirit and dedication were evident in every gesture and every task completed. João, even in his quietness, had much to offer, and he was ready to face whatever came his way with courage and determination. The office where João worked was a true human ant farm, always bustling, always moving. Located in the heart of the city, the glass and steel building reflected the frenetic pace of a company that never slept. Inside, the corridors were wide, the walls decorated with modern artwork, and the offices divided by glass partitions, allowing a sense of transparency and constant vigilance. The employees, each more ambitious than the other, moved quickly between meetings and deadlines, their eyes fixed on computer screens and piles of documents that never seemed to shrink. There was a well-defined hierarchy, and everyone knew exactly where they stood in the corporate food chain. Competition was fierce, and mistakes were rarely forgiven. It was an environment where weakness could be a sentence of ostracism. João, as a security guard, had a unique perspective on this ecosystem. He was always there, observing from his post near the main entrance, greeting everyone with a nod or a shy smile. His presence was constant, a familiar figure to all but close to none. He saw the comings and goings, the moments of tension, and the brief moments of relief when a deadline was met or a presentation ended smoothly. The head of security, a robust man named Roberto, was fair but unyielding, demanding excellence from his team. Roberto had a clear rule: each team member should know the facilities inside out and be prepared for any eventuality. João took this seriously, knowing every corner of the building like the back of his hand, always alert to any sign of trouble. João's colleagues varied in their attitudes. Some treated him with respect and sympathy, recognizing his effort and dedication. Others, however, saw him as an easy target for jokes and mean comments, taking advantage of his stuttering to feel superior. João endured these humiliations in silence, maintaining his dignity intact, even when words failed to defend him. There were also the high executives, almost mythical figures who rarely mingled with the rest of the staff. When they walked through the corridors, it was as if time stopped for a moment. Everyone knew that the key to success in the company lay in gaining the approval of these few chosen ones. Despite the difficulties, João found small joys in his work. He liked the constant pace, the feeling of doing something important by protecting the place and the people who worked there. Amid the organized chaos of the office, he was a calm presence, a point of stability that many did not even notice but was essential for the daily functioning of that intense and competitive environment. However, Beneath the surface of this frenzy, João knew that his true test was yet to come. The company, with all its grandeur and pressure, was a stage set for greater challenges, and he, with his stuttering and silent resilience, was about to face something that would change his life and others' perception of him. It was on a cloudy Tuesday, just past 9 in the morning, when João faced his first big test at the office. He was at his usual post near the main entrance, observing the flow of employees arriving in a hurry, each carrying the urgency of the day's commitments. Among them was Marcos, one of the most brilliant market analysts and also one of the most arrogant people in the office. Marcos always had an air of superiority, moving through the corridors as if he owned the place. He never missed an opportunity to assert himself at the expense of others, and João, with his stuttering, was an easy target. That day, however, Marcos seemed especially irritated, perhaps due to an important meeting or a report that didn't go as expected. As João checked the employees' badges, Marcos approached quickly, his forehead furrowed and his look impatient. "João, see, can you help me here?" he started. But before he could finish, Marcos cut him off impatiently. "Hurry up, João. I don't have all day. It seems like you're deliberately mumbling to annoy us," Marcos snapped, his voice filled with disdain. The cruel laughter that followed echoed through the lobby, drawing the attention of other colleagues passing by. João felt his face flush, a mix of embarrassment and frustration. He tried to respond, but the words seemed stuck in his throat, forming an insurmountable barrier. "I'm sorry, Marcos," he managed to stammer, his eyes fixed on the floor. The humiliation didn't stop there. "This is unacceptable, João. How do you expect to be taken seriously if you can't even speak properly?" Marcos continued, now louder, making sure everyone around heard. Other employees, instead of intervening, just watched from a distance, some with pitying expressions, others trying to hide smirks of mockery. That moment seemed to drag on forever, each second a wound to João's dignity. Finally, Marcos shrugged, rolled his eyes, and got into the elevator, leaving João alone with his unspoken words. The lobby returned to its usual bustle, but for João, something had changed. The public humiliation left him shaken, but it also planted a seed of determination. He knew he would need to prove to himself and others that his stuttering did not define his worth. At that moment, unnoticed by anyone, a silent strength began to emerge in João, one that would one day show the world the true meaning of resilience. João was born in a small town where everyone knew each other and life followed a calm and predictable rhythm. The only child of hardworking parents, he was always a curious and energetic boy. However, from a very young age, he began to notice that words did not come out of his mouth as easily as they did for others. In school, João's difficulties became more evident. During classes, he avoided raising his hand to answer questions, afraid that his stuttering would expose him to ridicule. His classmates, often without malice, laughed at his frustrated attempts to express himself, which only increased his isolation and insecurity. Despite these challenges, João was a dedicated student. He excelled in other areas, such as sports and activities that didn't require much speaking, earning the respect of teachers and some more understanding classmates. As the years went by, life continued to test João. His parents, always loving and supportive, did what they could to help him. They took him to various speech therapists and specialists, hoping to find a solution for his stuttering. Each therapy session was a battle, but João never gave up. He wanted to improve, not only for himself but to alleviate the constant worry in his parents' eyes. In his teenage years, João discovered a passion that would help shape his life: security. Fascinated by the discipline and importance of protecting others, he began training and studying everything he could about the field. This passion guided him to the big city, where he sought employment in companies that needed dedicated and attentive people like him. It was during this time that João met Maria, a kind and understanding young woman who worked as a receptionist at one of the companies where he applied for a job. Maria saw beyond João's stuttering, recognizing the kind and determined man he was. They fell in love, and not long after, they got married. With Maria by his side, João felt stronger and more confident. They built a loving and close-knit family with 2 children, Pedro and Ana, who were the joy of Joao's life. Despite the ongoing challenges with his stuttering, Joao never let it define him. He worked hard, always striving to improve and prove that he was capable. Each new job and responsibility were opportunities for him to show his strength and determination. Joao knew the road wouldn't be easy, but he was willing to walk it, always with his head held high and his heart full of hope. Now, at the office where he worked as a security guard, Joao carried with him all the lessons learned throughout his life. The stuttering was still a part of who he was, but it wasn't the only thing that defined him. Joao was more than his hesitant words. He was a man of character, courage, and a silent resilience that inspired everyone around him, even if many still didn't realize it. In a modest house on the outskirts of the city, Joao found his refuge and strength. His wife, Maria, was the cornerstone of his life. With her wavy brown hair and warm smile, she radiated an energy that made even the hardest days lighter. Since they met, Maria had been his biggest supporter, understanding his difficulties without judging him, always encouraging him to face challenges with his head held high. Maria had infinite patience. On the days when Joao came home carrying the weight of humiliation and challenges from work on his face, she knew exactly what to say or, often, what not to say. A silent hug, a hot meal on the table, and the constant presence of someone who loved him unconditionally worked wonders to restore his spirits. It was in her eyes that Joao found the encouragement to keep going, even when his stuttering seemed like an insurmountable wall. Their children, Pedro and Ana, were the sun that lit up his life. Pedro, the oldest, had his father's curiosity and loved to listen to Joao's stories, even when the words took time to come out. He waited patiently, sometimes finishing his father's sentences with a knowing smile. Ana, with her bright eyes and easy laugh, was a constant reminder that life was made up of small moments of joy. Joao made a point of being present in his children's lives, participating in their school activities, helping with homework, and being a loving and involved father. On weekends, the family often went to the park, where they spent hours playing and laughing, away from the pressures and judgments of the outside world. There, Joao was just the dedicated father and loving husband, and nothing else mattered. Maria had a special talent for creating an environment of love and security. She organized game nights and family movie sessions, where they laughed and had fun together, strengthening the bonds that kept them united. She always made sure to remind Joao of how valuable he was, not just to her, but to the children and everyone who was lucky enough to know him. The unconditional support of his family was Joao's anchor. Every word of encouragement, every gesture of affection, and every shared moment were fuel that fed his determination to continue. Joao knew that no matter the challenges he faced at work, he would always have a solid foundation to return to, a place where he was loved and accepted just as he was. In the midst of the daily struggle to prove himself at work, Joao found the strength to keep going in his family. They were his safe haven, the reason he got up every morning and faced the world. And although the path was difficult, he knew that with Maria, Pedro, and Ana by his side, he could overcome any obstacle. At night, when the house plunged into silence and the children's laughter turned into whispers of dreams, Joao was left alone with his thoughts. It was during these moments, lying next to Maria, that his insecurities and fears emerged most intensely. He stared at the dark ceiling, feeling the weight of expectations and uncertainties surrounding him. Stuttering had always been a persistent shadow in his life, a daily battle he had faced since childhood. Each hesitant word was a constant reminder of his limitations. Joao feared that his speech difficulties might be perceived as a lack of competence or intelligence. He knew he was capable, but the frustration of not being able to express himself with the fluency he desired eroded his confidence. At work, the pressure was immense. He feared that each new task was an opportunity to fail, that every encounter with colleagues could result in more humiliation. The memory of cruel laughter and disdainful looks haunted him, creating a cycle of anxiety that was hard to break. Joao wondered if he would ever be truly respected, if people could see beyond the stuttering and recognize his true value. Insecurity extended to his role as a father and husband. Although Maria and the children were his safe haven, he feared he wasn't enough for them. Would Pedro and Ana be ashamed of their father? Would Maria, despite all her love and patience, ever grow tired of always being the family's stable force? These questions swirled in his mind, creating a storm of doubts and fear. Even in moments of peace, like playing in the park or family movie nights, there was a part of João that wondered how long this happiness would last. He feared that one day his flaws would outweigh his qualities, that the difficulties would become unbearable for those he loved. This fear followed him like a shadow, always present, always whispering uncertainties. João also faced the fear of the unknown, the changes that could shake the fragile stability he had built. Each new day at work was a battle against his own insecurities, and he feared that a mistake could cost him not only his job, but also the dignity he fought so hard to maintain. However, amidst all these uncertainties, there was a small flame of hope. João knew that, despite his fears, he was not alone. Maria was his rock, Pedro and Ana his guiding lights. And although stuttering was a part of his life, he was determined not to let it define his destiny. He had to believe that, with courage and perseverance, he could face his fears and overcome his insecurities, one step at a time. João closed his eyes, trying to calm his mind. He took a deep breath, feeling Maria's comforting presence beside him. Amidst the whirlwind of doubts, he sought strength in the certainty that, no matter how difficult the days were, he would continue to fight. Because, in the end, a man's true value is not in the absence of fear but in the courage to face it. It was a Wednesday like any other, with the office enveloped in its usual hustle and bustle. João was at his post, attentive to the activity around him, when something unusual began to happen. Suddenly, the lights were flickering, and the computers were making strange noises. Within minutes, the news spread. The company's IT system was down. At first, there was only a murmur of confusion among the employees, which quickly turned into a wave of contained panic. The company relied heavily on its digital infrastructure, and any system failure meant loss of important data and interruption of critical business. Meetings were canceled, and senior executives emerged from their offices, their faces tense and worried. João observed everything from his post, noticing the rising agitation. He knew something serious was happening but didn't have all the details yet. Then, he heard his radio crackle and Roberto's urgent voice came through the channel. "We have a security problem, team. The system is compromised, and we need to secure the servers and critical equipment. João, come to the server room immediately." João felt a knot in his stomach but quickly left his post and headed to the server room in the building's basement. When he arrived, he found Roberto and other security team members, all with worried expressions. "Someone has managed to access our systems and caused a massive failure," Roberto explained, looking at João with seriousness. "We need to isolate the area and make sure no unauthorized person gets near the servers. You'll be on guard here." João nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He knew this was a crucial task. The server room was the heart of the company's operations, and any further damage could be catastrophic. With renewed determination, he took his position, vigilant and ready to act. Meanwhile, on the upper floor, the tension was mounting. Employees tried to solve the problem, but the responses were slow and uncertain. The board was in an emergency meeting, trying to understand the extent of the damage and how to mitigate the consequences. With each passing minute, the pressure increased. From his position, João heard fragments of conversations through the radio and in the corridors. He knew the situation was serious, but he also knew his role was crucial to maintaining order and protecting the company's most critical assets. The hours dragged on and the stress was palpable. João remained steadfast, focused on his task. He remembered Maria's words and his children's support, who always believed in him, and it gave him strength. He needed to rise to this responsibility, not just for himself but for everyone who depended on his work. The office problem was a trial by fire, a moment when João's true essence would be tested. And while chaos reigned around him, he stood firm, determined to protect what had been entrusted to him, showing everyone, and himself, that he was more than capable of facing any challenge that came his way. As João maintained his watch in the server room, the situation in the office was far from being resolved. Minutes turned into hours, and frustration was palpable in every corner of the building. The IT team, challenged by an unprecedented problem, desperately tried to find a solution, but each attempt seemed to only complicate the situation further. The first attempt was a quick effort to restart the system. The lights went out briefly, a desperate attempt to restore normal functioning. But when they came back on, the system was still down. The momentary relief some had hoped for turned into dismay. The hopes for a quick solution were dashed. Next, a senior technician began analyzing the error logs. He sifted through papers, typed furiously on the keyboard, and murmured technical terms to himself. The environment was charged with tension. The team watched in silence, each gaze a mix of hope and despair. But as the hours passed and the diagnostics showed no clear signs of a solution, frustration turned into despair. The third attempt involved contacting an external cybersecurity company. Specialists were summoned in haste and arrived with their own equipment and strategies. They performed thorough diagnostics, set up new tools, and tried to identify the point of failure. But instead of a definitive solution, what came were a series of contradictory diagnoses and suggestions that seemed to complicate the problem even more. Throughout these attempts, João remained in the server room, where the tension was almost tangible. The smell of electricity and the occasional sound of equipment failing to restart created an almost apocalyptic atmosphere. He was attentive to every movement, every person approaching the restricted area, but the external situation seemed like a roller coaster of dashed hopes. Outside, the office was in chaotic frenzy. Emergency meetings multiplied, and employees tried to resume work manually, a Herculean task without the support of digital systems. Each failed attempt at a solution was accompanied by murmurs of concern and the growing sense of a problem that seemed out of control. Hours dragged on, and the work environment was on the brink of collapse. The board, initially confident, began to show signs of fatigue and worry. The pressure was so high it was almost tangible. The sense of frustration was as intense as the fear of the unknown, and the clock kept ticking, each minute without a solution a cruel reminder of the gravity of the situation. João, however, was determined to do his part. Despite not fully understanding the technical aspects of the crisis, he knew his presence was vital. He watched with a mix of unease and hope, aware that the resolution, when it came, would depend not only on the expert skills but also on the resilience and hard work of everyone involved. Amidst so many failed attempts, the situation seemed like an endless battle. But even at the heart of the crisis, João remained steadfast, maintaining vigilance and hoping that, eventually, a solution would be found to restore order and normalcy in the office. In the dimly lit server room, where the air was heavy and charged with static electricity, João observed the scene with sharp attention. As the IT team and external experts struggled to resolve the chaos, he found himself in a unique position. Not just a passive observer, but an attentive witness to the small nuances that seemed to be part of the puzzle. João noticed something peculiar soon after the arrival of the external experts. Amidst the whirlwind of activity, he saw that one of the technicians frequently strayed from the main group, heading toward a less trafficked area of the room. Although the technician appeared focused, his furtive movements caught João's attention. Something about the way he looked at the equipment and fiddled with his tablet seemed off. As the main team discussed solutions and tried to restore the system, João watched the interactions among the team members. He noticed a growing discomfort among the experts, a lack of clear communication, and a sense of frustration that seemed to increase with each failed attempt. This discomfort was palpable, reflected in impatient gestures and murmurs of frustration. Additionally, João was struck by how the IT team, in particular, was reacting to the situation. He saw the team leader, a usually calm and controlled man, lose his patience and begin shouting contradictory orders. The pressure was clearly affecting everyone's performance and morale. Instructions became confusing, and chaos seemed to spread, making the task even harder. Among his observations, João also noticed a pattern in the small technical details that might have gone unnoticed by someone less attentive. The status lights on some of the servers were blinking in a specific way, and the frequency of the failures seemed to follow a cycle. He remembered the lessons he had learned in his security courses, and a fragment of knowledge told him that these lights could indicate an attempt at unauthorized access. With each new attempt at a solution, João also observed the behavior of those around him. The nervousness of the employees passing through the server room, the way they interrupted each other and looked at the experts with a mix of hope and despair. The environment was charged with an almost palpable tension, and every expression of frustration or relief seemed to tell a part of the story. Watching all this, João began to piece together a puzzle that might have been bigger than he initially imagined. He saw that, beyond the technical chaos, there was a human aspect to the crisis. Fear, frustration, and pressure were affecting everyone, creating an environment where even the best solutions could be overshadowed by a lack of clarity and communication. Amidst the tumult, João kept wondering if there was something more he could do. Even with the situation beyond his direct control, he felt that his observations might somehow contribute to the solution. He knew that the answer was not only in the devices and systems but also in the people fighting to restore order. The server room was enveloped in an almost electric tension, and João, with his attentive gaze and observant mind, became a crucial part of the scene, hoping that perhaps his insights could bring a glimmer of hope amid the chaos. The tension in the server room had reached an almost unbearable level. João watched the frenetic comings and goings of the experts and the growing turmoil among the office staff. The flickering lights of the servers created a dance of shadows that heightened the sense of chaos. He felt the pressure of the environment like an electric charge in his own nerves. As frustration mounted and solutions failed one after another, João found himself at a crossroads. The despair on his colleagues' faces and the sound of heated discussions were constant. He realized that the problem was not just the technical failure, but the growing lack of clarity and communication among the teams. With a determination that arose from the depths of his experience and observation, João decided he needed to act. He had observed patterns and behaviors that might be relevant to solving the problem. His mind was clearing, and a solution began to form from the observations he had made. João took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision he was about to make. He knew that his position was not the ideal one for proposing drastic changes, but he also knew that if he did nothing, the situation could worsen. It was time to use the knowledge he had accumulated, even if it meant stepping out of his comfort zone and facing resistance from a clearly overwhelmed team. He approached the team of experts, his voice firm despite his nervousness. "I noticed a pattern in the failures and the behavior of the servers. There might be an attempt at unauthorized access causing the disruptions. The status lights and the frequency of the failures seemed to indicate an external overload." The experts looked at João, surprised by the observation. The team leader paused, evaluating the suggestion. There was a spark of interest in his eyes, a sign that perhaps João was pointing to something they hadn't considered. João felt a wave of relief mixed with anxiety. He knew his words could be a turning point, but he also knew he had to be persuasive and clear. João continued, highlighting the specific points he had noticed and suggesting an alternative line of investigation that might lead to a solution. He spoke with confidence, not because he was completely sure, but because he felt it was the moment to use his intuition and acquired knowledge. The team, exhausted and desperate for any new perspective, began to follow his suggestions. As the new analyses and checks were conducted based on João's observations, the environment around seemed to calm a bit. The team was now focused on a new direction, and the hope of finding a solution began to emerge slowly from the darkness. João stood on the sidelines, watching the unfolding events with a mix of anxiety and hope. He knew there was still a long way to go, but the decision to act, to bring his observations to light, was a crucial step. He had taken a stand and, with it, brought a new energy to the room that was so desperate for a spark of hope. As the atmosphere in the server room became more focused and determined, a new wave of hope began to spread. The team, now guided by João's observations, was deeply immersed in a more detailed investigation. Each technician and specialist was focused on analyzing the data with renewed intensity, while João, though not a TI expert, became a key player in the team. With Joao's suggestion as a guide, the specialists began to examine the behavior of the status lights and the failure cycles. They correlated Joao's observations with their own analyses, and gradually, a clearer pattern began to emerge. Joao was surprised to see how his insights were helping to refine the investigation. He kept a close watch, answering questions and providing additional details whenever requested. One of Joao's major contributions was identifying a possible entry point for the failure. He suggested the team investigate a specific area of the system that seemed to have been overlooked previously. Through a series of checks and analyses, the senior technician confirmed that the area Joao suggested was indeed showing signs of an attempted breach. The connection was made with an external threat that had been initially underestimated. The collaborative effort between Joao and the specialists brought forth an innovative approach to isolating the problem. They implemented corrective measures based on Joao's observations, adjusting protocols and adding extra layers of security that could neutralize the threat. The TI team, typically focused on traditional solutions, began to recognize the importance of the practical and detailed perspective Joao brought. In a moment of high tension, Joao watched the monitors as the team applied the changes. The servers, which had been flickering intermittently, began to show signs of stability. It was as if, for the first time in hours, the system was starting to recover, slowly but with increasing confidence. Joao's contribution also extended to the work environment. His active role and positive attitude helped restore the team's morale. He maintained a constant presence, encouraging colleagues and ensuring that the focus remained on solutions rather than getting lost in past frustrations. His ability to observe, suggest, and collaborate brought a new dynamic to the room, one that was much needed amid the chaos. As the system began to stabilize, the team of specialists and technicians recognized the significant impact of Joao's contribution. They were increasingly inclined to value the unique perspective he brought, a perspective that, though not technical, was crucial to solving the problem. Joao had proven himself not just a vigilant observer, but also an essential collaborator in the system's recovery. And so, as the tension eased and the office began to return to its routine, Joao remained a symbol of how an attentive eye and well-placed contribution can make all the difference. His presence and actions helped transform a moment of despair into a collaborative triumph, proving that, even outside his area of expertise, he had a vital role to play in resolving a crisis. The atmosphere in the office was a palpable mix of relief and euphoria, as if the entire building was finally exhaling a breath that had been held for hours. The emergency lights, which had been flashing incessantly, now remained steady, and the monitors began to display data and graphs with renewed stability. The frantic sound of keyboards and the hum of discussions turned into a whisper of satisfaction and curiosity. Employees, who had spent the day navigating a sea of uncertainties and frustrations, now faced a new reality. Emergency meetings began to dissipate, giving way to more relaxed conversations and a gradual return to normalcy. The office, once a battlefield against an invisible enemy, was starting to regain its usual rhythm. The first notable reaction was genuine gratitude for Joao's contribution. He, who had recently been a vigilant figure at the back of the room, was now receiving looks of recognition and appreciation. His colleagues, who had been worried and tense, now greeted him with smiles and words of thanks. The change in their perception was remarkable. Joao had gone from a discreet team member to an unexpected hero. The head of security, Roberto, called Joao for a meeting in the main office. When Joao entered, he found a group of executives and TI team members, all with expressions of relief and gratitude. Roberto stood up and, with a smile reflecting palpable relief, said, "Joao, your observation was crucial in resolving the situation. Without your contribution, we wouldn't have been able to stabilize the system." Joao felt a wave of pride mixed with a touch of shyness. He knew he had made a significant contribution, but the public recognition brought a new level of satisfaction. Roberto's words were a reflection of the transformation that had occurred not only in the system but also in the work environment. As the tension eased, the office began to reorganize and resume its routine. Teams gathered to assess what had happened and plan the next steps. The dialogue was more collaborative, and there was a sense of renewed cohesion among the employees. The work environment, once filled with frustration and despair, was now imbued with a new spirit of cooperation and optimism. Executives, relieved by the resolution of the crisis, began to reflect on the lessons learned. They recognized the importance of a more integrated and collaborative approach, and the situation had created an opportunity for improvements in processes and communication. The crisis had served as a catalyst for necessary changes, and the office was adjusting to a new, more inclusive and proactive mindset. Among the employees, there was a significant increase in morale and team spirit. Conversations that had once revolved around chaos and uncertainty now focused on celebrations and strategies to prevent future issues. The sense of collective victory permeated the office, bringing a renewed sense of purpose and unity. João, who had been a pillar of resilience and determination during the crisis, was now seen as an example of how attentive observation and the courage to act can make a difference. He had become a symbol of how every team member, regardless of their role, can significantly influence the outcome of a challenging situation. The office, now in a state of recovery and revitalization, reflected a new perspective on teamwork and the importance of listening to all voices, especially those often underestimated. The transformation was not only technological but also cultural, and João, with his decisive contribution, had helped shape a new era of cooperation and success for everyone. With the office finally restored to normalcy and the relief still hanging in the air, João found himself in a rare moment of tranquility. The frenetic buzz had diminished, and the environment was immersed in a nearly meditative silence, a pause after the storm. The office lights, which had once flickered restlessly, now illuminated the space with a soft, steady glow. João was alone at his desk, a small office adjacent to the server room. The late afternoon shadows were cast through the windows, creating a play of light and shadow that mirrored the state of his mind. He gazed outside, observing the urban horizon stretching before him, a serene contrast to the turmoil he had experienced in recent hours. The recent experience had been a rigorous test of his patience, courage, and skills. João allowed himself a moment to reflect on what he had learned and how he had grown throughout the process. He thought about how, initially, he had been a silent observer, and how, over time, he had become an active participant in solving a critical problem. He remembered the insecurities he had felt before the crisis, how his speech issue made him feel invisible in an environment where communication was vital. The tension and fear he had experienced while facing a complex technical problem were deep, but the need to act had forced João to overcome his limitations and find a new way to express himself. Each challenge he faced, from the frustrating attempts to resolve the crisis to the team's reactions, had shaped his understanding of himself and his role within the company. The need to act, to take a stand, and offer significant contributions in a moment of crisis had revealed an inner strength João did not know he possessed. He saw in himself a resilience and observational ability that were essential to solving the problem. The recognition he received from colleagues and supervisors was not just a reward for effort, but a validation that his voice and contributions were important. The change in how others viewed him also reflected a transformation in how he saw himself. João was beginning to shed the shackles of his insecurities and embrace the idea that his unique perspective and skills, even those that seemed out of the ordinary, had invaluable worth. As he reflected, João felt a sense of accomplishment and a deep sense of gratitude. He had overcome personal and professional challenges, and this experience had provided a new understanding of his place in the world and in the office. He knew the crisis had been a turning point, not just for the company, but for himself. The horizon outside, illuminated by the setting sun, seemed promising and full of new possibilities. João understood that by confronting his own limitations and contributing to solving a critical problem, he had embarked on a journey of personal growth that would prepare him for future challenges. He was ready to embrace the lessons learned and apply this new perspective to all areas of his life. With a calm smile and a light heart, João stood up from his desk. He had found a new strength and purpose amid the chaos, and with that, he was ready to face the future with renewed confidence and a deeper understanding of his own value. Click on the video being recommended to you now.